I'm Jeff Ernst, glad to be here today. And like a lot of you, I'm a career B2B marketing and sales guy. I've been in many different earlier stage software companies. Then I had the opportunity to go to Forrester a few years ago, and that's where I honed my buyer persona skills and appreciated the value of really understanding buyer personas and realized that I was shooting in the dark my whole career leading up to that by not knowing how my buyers buy. And then now I've got two jobs. I'm the CEO and founder of Slap5, which is a company that with a software platform that helps companies capture their customers' voice and unleash that in the marketplace to knock down their biggest sales challenges. As well as I'm a principal researcher at the Buyer Persona Institute. I just love buyer personas so much. I just can't get enough of doing those types of interviews and helping companies really understand what makes their buyers tick. And I'm joined here by Steve. You want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, we are good. Steve, Patti, about 30 years of B2B sales and marketing experience, largely in technology, some of it in banking, some in industrial, so cross-segment experience. I used to be a longtime Forrester client, so I read a lot of Jeff's work. It was a real honor here to pair up with Jeff today. Many of you probably are familiar with Jeff's work as well. I, up until a year ago, was still an active B2B CMO. Became frustrated with my inability through agency partners to find sometimes the depth of research and the competent content creation I needed. So I decided to solve the problem by stepping out of a full-time CMO role and building a team to go solve it for other CMOs that were probably as frustrated as I was. So as with anything, it's a journey. It's not a destination. We haven't got all this figured out, but we want to share with you today a little bit of what we've learned and then learn from you from the perspective you can offer in terms of what you're seeing.
Great. And I have a funny story to tell. So Brian, a couple weeks ago when he said, oh yeah, I'm going to match you up with Steve, Patti to do a presentation. I'm like, what the F? I mean, coming up with a joint presentation is so hard. But then Steve and I got on the telephone call about 2 weeks ago, and I understood exactly why Brian mentioned us up. We were like brothers from the different mothers or something. We just sort of hit it off. We had the same perspectives, but also complementary views to this topic. I'm all about the customer voice and how and what types of insights you should get for your customers. He's very good at injecting that into all of your sales and marketing activities. And so that's really, I think, a good lead-in for the agenda. But what I want to ask of people here is I need you to be open-minded because we're going to be challenging the current thinking about content in general, but we're not doing a full content session. Go to Jim Burns' session tomorrow if you really want to get into content. But we're going to be challenging more the how you handle customer proof and customer evidence and customer stories, because I believe today it's broken. And so we're going to present a whole new way of looking at that. So just real quickly, we're going to talk about why it's broken and show you some examples from my buyer persona work about the real reasons buyers buy, and then show you what I call a more surgical approach to understanding what types of insights you should be getting from your own customers to earn trust and help your sales reps navigate all those problems that they have in the sales cycle. And then we've got a little exercise on that sheet of paper you have. I'm going to have you do just one row of an exercise following this methodology. And then Steve's going to get up and he's going to talk about the authentic customer voice. How can it be used for more than just the classic voice of the customer program, which is usually about just feedback and insights, but how can you inject it into all of your sales and marketing, how and why? And he's going to show you a very clever customer-generated content model that will help you really understand how to do that better. So again, open up your minds, here we go. So I like to say that we now live and work in a trust economy, right? At Forrester, all of my research showed that buyers today put so much more trust in their peers and colleagues than they do in your sales reps and your marketing messages. Unfortunately, no matter how much we arm our reps, there's still that limiting trust factor. And in all those buyer persona interviews that I've done, the ultimate decision criteria of why a buyer buys is they don't buy the company with the best product or the cheapest product. They buy from the company that they trust the most, that you've earned their trust, and they trust that you're the one that's going to make them the most successful. And so trust is really the new competitive differentiator here. And so what I'd like to do, and sorry it's a little bit of an eye chart here, you don't need to read it all, and you'll have all the slides as well, but I'm going to show you a real example. I want to jump into the weeds on purpose a little bit here, and show you the real example of a buyer persona study that I wrapped up about 3 weeks ago. And what I want to show you first off is, what do buyers do? For this particular company, it was a software company that had software for accounting and finance software, specifically around tax calculations and tax compliance and things like that. And I've genericized a few things to protect the company's identity and secrets and things like that. So usually the insights are a little more specific than this, but I upped it at like one level. But what you'll notice here as we go through and you can call these phases whatever you want, but there's generally, discover your problem and decide to take action, and then you research it, and then then you're out evaluating and comparing alternatives and making the decision, and then you're using it and adopting and hopefully expanding. But all the orange chevrons there are places where the buyer has gone out to their friends or peers or colleagues or network to get information, to get opinions, to capture experiences. So look at that. We ask colleagues in similar roles in companies. Right off the bat, they're doing that. When they first discover, and they haven't even decided whether to solve the problem yet, they're reaching out. We ask others in our industry association what they use. We go online and read peer reviews. Then they get into the research phase. I look for stories from other customers about what they've done. Then look when they're in the evaluate and buy phase. We call the vendor references to learn what went well and what didn't go well. But then also, they don't always trust the vendor references because they know you're only going to be putting up your best clients. So they go and do their own backdoor reference checking. So look at the trust issue that we have going on here. And then the most significant factor here is you look at the box in red. This is when they ask 2 or 3 vendors to come in and give us their pitch. So look how much they've done with peers already, and in general, before they've actually reached out and started to talk to the vendors. And a lot of you are probably familiar with the CEB research that they're through 57% through their buying process by the time. I believe that number is low. So because they've already gone through the solution identification, the problem definition, the solution identification, and now they're trying to evaluate and compare, and they've come down to their list of finalists before they're reaching out and talking to your reps. So how many people try to get their reps in earlier in deals, thinking that you can impact shape the vision of the solution? Yeah, you've got to do that, but that's often hard. How many people give their reps the content they need to go in and have those conversations to try to shape that? Or the conversational support that they need. Do you try to do a little bit of that? But in my experience, the star reps do this intuitively. The other 90% will never be able to do it, right? It's really hard. So continuing on the eye chart theme, again, don't even bother reading that. I'm just going to expand that a little bit. But now I want to show you what, even more important, what do buyers want to know as they go through this buying process. Okay, so, and again, I genericize these a little bit, but a lot of times when I do my buyer persona work and assemble it for my client, these tend to be very specific to their business. And so, but look what they do. So they're asking, how have similar companies solved this problem right off the bat? That's what they're researching. And they're talking to friends about that. They're wondering, can we get executive level support? Do we have the right skill sets on our team to handle this type of initiative? So not surprising, this is all about themselves, not about the vendors, right? They are questioning themselves. Are we ready to make a change? Okay, can we make our staff more efficient? Real software company that went through this. Then in the research, who are the big players in the space? Who should I spend my time actually looking at? And they're going to ask their friends, or colleagues, who are the big ones? Who has the best reputation and how strong are their reputations? Is the software intuitive enough, that people can use it without training? So I'm kind of researching, is this the right approach to take? And now I've kind of decided that I want to take maybe a software solution to this tax problem that I have, and I'm in the evaluate and buy phase. What do customers have to say about their experiences working with this vendor? That's what they want to know. What pitfalls have their customers hit? One of the favorite things I always ask in the research is when people are doing those reference checks, what are the number one question you ask? Anybody guess what the number one question people ask on a reference call? Or do you know for your company? What's the number one question? How was the sport? Yeah. Would you buy them again? Yeah. They're all very, very close. But number one is, why did you buy in the first place? Why did you decide to not, keep the status quo? Number two is always the what pitfalls have you hit and how'd you get through them? And then number three is if you were to start all over again, what would you do differently? And across all the clients I work with, those are always come up. That's what they ask. That's what their buyers ask. And then it doesn't just end when they've signed the contract. And so again, they're on the, how do I avoid the pitfalls now? So that's on their mind. How do we get our users to adopt this thing quickly? And a lot of apps struggle with adoption. How are we doing compared to peers? They always want to know how they're doing. But if you look at what do all these things have in common, all these questions, what they all have in common is that the experiences and voice and knowledge and advice of your customers can address these questions much better than any content that you can write. Yet we're in this world of this content marketing world with inbound marketing and everything where marketers are now publishers and we have to be putting out 5 articles a week and I predict that this is a bubble, that we're putting so much mediocre content out there trying to keep up as a publisher, but we're not addressing the real buyer persona needs here. And that's why, one of the reasons why I think the current content model is broken. So that's what we're here to address. And so what I want to do is show you a better way on how to take a strategic, surgical approach to customer stories. Okay, so we made the case why you need the customer's voice and why the customer is the expert, one of the, that's best able to address the real needs that buyers have. So how do you do it? Well, first of all, this is where you have to unlearn case studies. I hope after today, you probably will never want to write another case study again or ask marketing for another case study. Please don't. They're useless. No buyer ever looks at a case study. But we produce gazillions of them, and I've written hundreds of them in my career. And I wish I had that time back. Reference programs. How do you know what people are saying on a reference call? I had a client of mine say the other day, he arranged a reference call, the customer got on the call and spent 30 minutes just talking about why he's evaluating other options and about to move off their platform. He was like, oh my God. And so he called up the customer, said, what was going on? Usually you give us a good reference. And they just said, oh, I was having a bad day. I still like you guys. You have no control, right? And so how do you gather, the real customer stories that are going to address these needs? Well, so this is sort of a methodology. We start off by really understanding what are your, strategic priorities or initiatives or campaigns for the next 6 to 12 months. You should know what those are. What do you really want to do in the market? And then from that, when you think about how am I going to be successful with those initiatives, what are the challenges that are keeping you from achieving those initiatives? I'm sorry, I keep stepping in your way. So what are the challenges that keep you from achieving those initiatives? Or what are the opportunities that you have to make those initiatives more successful by unleashing the customer voice or the customer perspective? So I like to say, what are the questions, fears, and doubts that your buyers have? If you know this, and this could be customers have at any stage of the life cycle, because you want to knock down those barriers wherever they are. But this is very different than just writing a case study because a customer said yes, which is what most people do. They'll just, anytime a customer says yes, they'll go, let's go write a case study. So the questions, fears, and doubts, once you know those, and you really need to do real buyer persona work to really know these, because think about it, even if you just ask your salespeople what these things are, they're only dealing people that actually reached out to you as a vendor and engaged with that sales rep and had that conversation. That could only be 10 or 20% of the people that bought a solution like you have. So even just relying on salespeople is not enough to really surface the real buyer journey and the real issues that they face. And then what do? Then we take those and we say, how can we surface customer insights to knock down those issues or nullify the objection or clarify that misperception that they have? And we do this by thinking about what knowledge, what experiences or advice or feedback can I gather from customers that would actually knock down that issue. And I have a couple of examples that I'm just going to go through this, but then I'm going to bring it to life with some real examples again. And then, the third part is let's then go out and capture the stories that knock down these issues from our customers, identify who those customers are, capture those stories, and then inject them into all of our marketing and sales activities where it makes sense, where we're looking for that evidence, where we're looking for that validation, or where we're looking to overcome that objection, whatever it might be. Okay? Any questions there on kind of how this surgical top-down approach, strategic approach is different than just saying, oh, a customer said yes, let's go write a case study, and then, oh, sales wants more case studies, let's, give them more case studies. Oh, you need banking? Okay, we'll go get a banking customer, but without regard for what problems you're trying to solve in your life cycle, and without regard for whether that customer has a point of view that's going to help knock that down. All right, any questions before I move on? Does that make sense? Yep.
When you said case study earlier, did you mean more like writing about a product or a service?
No.
Is there a differentiator when you talk about capturing a customer story that if it's thought leadership, so it's maybe a higher point of view, whether in an industry or
Yep.
technology, does that differentiate as well?
Well, it does. And when I say case study, I mean the classic case study that every B2B company writes. They find a customer, they send a writer to go interview them for 30 to 60 minutes, and then they write this narrative in the third person about the customer, and it's always in the same format: challenge, solution, result, then happy quote in the sidebar. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Did I describe it? That's the anatomy of a case study. And that's what I'm saying. Never, guess how many times in my B2B buyer persona research of 400 interviews I've done, somebody has actually said, I used a case study. Zero. And in fact, it's very rare that they even mention any branded content that impacted their buyer's journey. But you saw the yellow boxes for all the places where they went to peers and colleagues and looked for information. So the opportunity is huge to fit into how they buy with customer voice. Is that a question? Because that's all people know. They don't know there's a better way. And here's the reason. Too many marketing teams are gold on activity, not on results. Too many sales teams just think, oh, I'm selling to a banking customer. I need a banking case study just to give me, some backing. So case studies are good for one thing. They create envy, right? So you've got this big logo, but the buyers don't actually read them. Nobody wants to read a 4-page PDF. So what you're doing here now is you're finding out what is it that the buyers really want to know, what issues do they really want to satisfy in their mind, and you're going to get it for them. And so I'm going to give you a good example of a customer I do this with. And so those 3 steps that I just mentioned, you should have all been given a customer voice canvas. This is a tool that I use. I developed it at Forrester and use it now in my current businesses. And if you don't have one, there's plenty that you can grab more of. I'm going to have you write on this in just a minute, and you can always grab a blank one on the way out, and they'll be posted online for you to use it. But I call this the Customer Voice Strategy Canvas, because this is helping you really understand, how to think through what I really need to be doing. And so this company is a next-generation antivirus software company. Anybody in that industry? Uh-oh. Your company? Okay. Then, so you probably know who this is, because you know their naming convention. All right. Oh, shit.
Sorry.
Okay. I'm going to have you sign an NDA before you leave here. So again, I'm going to talk at a very high level because I don't give away my clients' problems and solutions that often. So believe me. But I'll just give you, and you probably can relate to this. Anybody that's that knows this next-gen antivirus space. One of the things that they were struggling with, which I have in this first column here with the number 3, is that there wasn't just not enough urgency. These people are stuck in their old ways of thinking that this traditional antivirus is good enough. And so there wasn't enough urgency to upgrade to this next-gen antivirus because they just didn't understand, why should I? And so they're already using Sophos or Trend Micro or Symantec or Kaspersky. Did anybody in those companies here? Well, if you're in Kaspersky, you're in enough problems. So what we did is we said, okay, how are we going to knock down and create urgency and make people realize you're still exposed? You're going to lose your job if you don't address this. We went out and asked a bunch of their customers a simple question. Tell us, what types of advanced attacks are you now able to detect and stop that you weren't able to detect with your traditional antivirus? And we gathered up those stories, put them on a landing page for the sales reps, and boom, they used that whenever they were trying to create urgency. The inside sales guys or the BDRs were using that for prospecting when they were doing calling campaigns into it. And then the marketing team used it for their replacement campaign against Symantec and McAfee. Is it McAfee or McAfee?
It's a McAfee.
I always thought McAfee. Somebody else the other day was saying, no, it's McAfee. So that's what we did. You can see there, what types of advanced attacks. And then we created some assets for them, using these digital stories about, like we call them displacement motivators. How are we going to get people to consider what to do? And then another issue that we're having that you see on this chart is that, the messaging is all about how much better this is, but it's also more expensive to buy this product. So we had to surface from the customers, what's the incremental value of this next gen AV? And again, we weren't even asking for endorsements of this vendor. We were just asking them to share what made it so urgent for you to move. And what value, additional value are you getting? So that's one of the big things I learned at Forrester, and really, I hope you take this seriously, is when you're trying to capture stories from customers, forget the whole thing that we're so used to doing, which is asking for endorsements, recommendations, or testimonials. Because buyers can't always give you those. They might be handcuffed by PR or legal restrictions. But even the better is that buyers don't want those. How many people have happy quotes on their website? XYZ company rocks. I recommend them to anybody. Anybody have? Come on, be honest. Who's got happy quotes on their website? Okay. They don't help buyers. Buyers have specific questions, specific fears and doubts. They need context for those happy quotes. So again, with this, what we did is we just asked customers, what's the incremental value you get from working with this type of a next-gen antivirus versus before? And they dove right in and talked about all the advanced visibility they have into the endpoint devices. So they can now see when a device has been infected and isolate it, quarantine it, before it's had a chance to infiltrate their network, and then they can have a complete view across their whole, all the devices on their network. So incredible way of them, that type of stuff never comes out in a case study. And so this is we walk through our customers, we walk through this whole process, and one thing that you can do, and you'll see there's directions on the back of that sheet that I gave you on how to fill this out, but there's an alternative way if you're not yet ready to go this far into it. In column 5, instead of making your plan for how you're going to use these in your sales and marketing, you could just use that to do a gap analysis against your current marketing and sales, the current content you have that communicates customer stories and evidence. And you just say, we've identified this issue. Has anybody, does this exist anywhere in our content? And never have I found anybody that said yes. Oh, we have a case study that mentions that. We have a video that mentions that. It's hardly ever, because nobody has taken this more surgical approach. So what I'd like to do now, any questions on this before, is it fairly intuitive? Is there anything that's not intuitive about this? No? So, okay, then I'm going to put you to the test then. Just think about, we want to do one quick exercise here. So take out that sheet. You can either write right on that sheet and get another clean one on the way out, or write it in your notebook. But think about what do you know? If you think about your major go-to-market initiatives or strategies for this year, try to come up with one market issue that's getting in the way, like some perception, competitive FUD, a new competitor is starting to infiltrate your business. Is it too many stakeholders to get on the same page? Is it lack of urgency? There's just, it's considered a nice to have. Is it objection, or maybe even just start with an objection. That might be the easiest thing for this exercise. Just pick your biggest objection that your salespeople try to deal with. How many people think they have one and that they can write down an objection? You have one?
You guys are too expensive.
You guys are too expensive. Yeah? Anybody get that objection? Well, if price is coming up, these guys went all the way through that whole problem-solving process before reaching out, and now they're shopping for price. So they already know who can do what they need. They learned that on their own. They figured that out on their own and by going to their colleagues. Anybody else want to share an objection?
That the perceived pain of change is greater than the actual
Yep.
what I perceive.
Great. Or to put another way, is it worth it? You know, it might be too painful, or there's lots of variations of that statement that I hear in my clients. One is our organization ready for this? We don't have the skill sets. We don't have the resources to do this work on our team. We're not mature enough as an organization to tackle something like this. You know, so those are all variations, I think, of that same. Any others? Yeah.
So we have they want us to show how we will measure business results of the program, but yet they're not enabled or capable necessarily of doing that in terms of being able to show the impact. But they want us to prove it in advance.
Ah, okay. I had that with a customer too. This was a telco expense management company. Wanted to know, how much are you going to save me on my wireless bills? They wanted to know that in the first call. And they're like, we can't answer that. It depends. So what did they do? They went and they asked some of their customers, not just, you know, give me the percentage of what we saved, but, you know, they just said, tell me, in what areas did you discover the biggest savings in your telecommunications expenses by working with us? And so that's the best way you can answer that question, is have other customers talk about, you know, where they found that source of savings, or if that's one of the big benefits that you promise. Does that resonate at all with what you're doing? Okay. Yeah. We already have a solution. Okay, I had a customer that was, one of my customers is selling a content marketing platform for aggregating content into streams that make it really easy to consume. Their biggest objection is, why can't we do this with our Marketo or Eloqua system already? You know, so we already have this technology. Or I've got another security software company client that says, we have technology fatigue right now. We can't even imagine, you know, bringing on another technology. So now you need to, you know, think about an insight that you could gather from your customer that would knock that down. So the first one, you know, we actually went out and we decided to do this with each of the marketing technology, the big three that their customers use. It was either Eloqua, Marketo, or HubSpot, with a few Pardots in there. But you know, with those, we covered most of the market. We basically said to them, we asked them, you know, just tell us, why were you not able to do what you're doing with your marketing automation platform? So we asked them a question like that. Again, we weren't looking for praise or endorsement or happy quotes or things like that. Tell us seriously what was going through your mind that made you realize that you couldn't do this with your marketing automation platform. Do you see how that might help knock that objection down? Any others? Come on, challenge me here. I love this stuff. Anybody think they have an objection that customer voice couldn't knock down better than your sales reps?
I don't know if I have that, but I want to get your thoughts around, this may be unique to my firm. We're not a product company, we're a service company.
Yep.
And a lot of times our clients don't even, in the SOW, they go, you can't mention who we are.
Yep.
We're never going to give you quote.
Yep.
We can't do a press release that we just signed this multi-year deal.
Yep. Yep.
And so, in this context, not being able to reference very many Fortune 100 brand names.
Yep.
Customers.
Yep.
Help me with how we do this.
Oh, I have a whole session on that, just that problem alone.
So my company's in cybersecurity as well, and public references at quite hard, but we've got over 1,000 of them published. Very, very similar, but we also do lots of use cases around like white papers with logos attached to it, things like, you know, how do you safely enable content for K-12 and stuff, right? So,
Yep.
so leadership stuff. What we found is, even though organizations can't be a published case study, we've got two other tiers of case studies, either name drops or peer reference calls that we do as introductions, and that's it, right? So for the CIO for that university, it's a policy that can't be published, but here's their phone number, you can reach out.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
good.
do that when we get to the right point in the buying process.
Right.
We don't want to inundate.
Right.
Good clients would take another reference call.
Right. Does anybody else suffer from reference fatigue or not wanting to use your references too early? So you wait until the very end, till you're sure they're going to say yes, as long as it's a good reference? Everybody suffers from that. This is a great way to overcome that. In fact, Microsoft is a company I'm working with right now. They're doing that exact same thing. They've got reference fatigue because they've only got 2 or 3 CIOs that will speak to the real benefits of Microsoft Dynamics for operations. And again, I'm probably speaking out of turn again here, but we all know this company. So, and that guy finally said last month, enough is enough. I mean, I love you guys, and I'll do 3 a month, but I don't want to do 10 a month. And so they're now packaging up those most common questions that those buyers have that they ask in those reference calls as reusable assets. And now they can actually use those earlier because you saw in the buyer journey, they want customer proof early. They don't want to wait till the very end to be able to hear what your customers have to say. So you need to package this up before they're talking to your reps. Get this in front of them before they're talking to your reps. Yeah?
You're triggering a point. My company no longer produces content. We used to produce these kind of vignettes, but we were doing it for sales engineers and technical support people.
Yep.
Had the same issue, which is I'm getting overburdened by answering what they call level 1 or level 2 questions, where the rep couldn't handle, and it was critical because if they didn't get through that, they weren't advancing the account.
Right.
So they did this equivalent, and we produced those, but it was production.
Right. Yeah, it's a production effort. And again, you can make it super easy on your customers. I think you were talking about that before. One of the things, you can just do an interview with a customer on the phone and gather a story from them and record it. And now you've got a great way to, carve that up into the 4 big points, golden nuggets that they've made. And that is another capability that my software provides as well. We've created a mobile responsive web service, basically, that allows you just to prompt your customers so that they can just respond to a question at their leisure. They got an hour to kill before they're boarding their plane. They're going to take 30 seconds of that to answer a question. Okay, blah, 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 blah. But the key here is don't over-engineer and over-design the customer voice, because another thing that my buyer research showed at Forrester is when you put those very highly produced customer videos out there, they're great to kick off a user conference. Like, anybody go to Salesforce? You know how they have all those great like Ducati motorcycles? You see them whipping around the track, and then they give you goosebumps when you watch these videos. But they don't help buyers, right? I mean, it's brand building. But buyers, when they're in the buying process, they perceive those as ads, not as real evidence. So let me just, anybody else dying to share their objection that they came up with?
I
Or?
have a question, maybe this is where you're headed, which is kind of the practical nature then of managing that. Because I think, for better or worse, the reason case studies and testimonials are popular is it's a way of packaging them in a way that at
Yep.
least you can say, hey, here's what you can choose from by industry,
Yep.
by problem, and it arms the sales team with better than nothing.
Yep.
And so I'm hoping you're going to show us how to capture that voice.
Exactly. Great setup. Boom. Boom. Here we go. Yeah, so I'll just show you exactly an example. So this is carbon black, but this is a publicly viewable page. So this is the one I was telling you about that had some problems with creating urgency among the chief security officers because they weren't familiar with the risk, or they didn't know enough about the risk, so there wasn't enough urgency. And so here's the case where we just asked a couple of those customers, and I'll scroll down, you can see there's Trevor from DraftKings. He's sharing his story. Here's Greg Notch from the NHL. So because we're asking these guys to share advice and not give us endorsements, they can talk, even if that contract says you can't put my logo on the site. So, here's Greg, I can see what he's answering. I flip this.
Along with our current antivirus solution. Obviously, more is getting through. We've just noticed an uptick of increased endpoint activity and issues with that. We've also noticed that there's a lot of new ransomware variants out there, and they're getting more sophisticated. They're sewing into the endpoints.
So you get the idea. He's talking about why it was so urgent to make this move. And then this one, I happen to put them on the same page, but just to answer that second question, here's a couple of customers talking about what that incremental value is have you gotten from this that you didn't get from your traditional AV. And this is where they're jumping in and asking, answering the question about the visibility that they now have across their entire network. So, yeah. So I have another customer. Actually, the Buyer Persona Institute. I work with them. They're also a client, so I work with them in both my jobs. They work with big Fortune 100 companies, and like SAP is a customer of theirs. The guy's like a 45-year veteran at SAP, close to retirement, doesn't want to rock the boat. He said, you can use my name, you can use my picture, you can use my title, and you can have the link to my LinkedIn profile, but you can't use my company name. And that's the most restrictive any of my clients have ever found their customers to be in terms of being identified. All right? So because people, if you do it right, you're making people sound smart, you're making them feel successful, and you're allowing them to be heard. And our basic nature is we want to feel smart, we want to sound smart, right? Yeah, and so in that case, so they might semi-anonymize it. That's an option. Or yeah, yeah. No, it would still be. It's like 90% is effective. It's great when you can identify the company. But if somebody wants to look them up on LinkedIn, they see their name and title, they can find them on LinkedIn if somebody really wants to know. So. But yeah, if it has to be totally anonymous, what I prefer to do is instead say, can we use this just in select situations, like with very carefully, highly qualified prospects, and make the page highly secure? This is what we're doing with Microsoft. So we create the landing page for them that's secured. It blows up after 48 hours, and the person who receives it can't share it. And so then they're tracking everybody that views it. So I do want to move on. I think I've gone way over. I want to give Steve his chance and to jump in, and let me put us back over. Are we in the presentation now? Yes.
Fantastic. Well, how do I follow that? So in all seriousness, what Jeff has done is a really good job, and frankly, I love this stuff. We could sit here for 2 hours, but he started out particularly with those orange chevrons, talking about what buyers do, information and questions buyers have. Actually, it's fears, questions, and doubts. And then kind of contrasted that with, despite that, here's what we tend to do as sales and marketing professionals, right? Sales enablement kind of right there in the middle. We're not really aligned in terms of the what we're saying, and the how we're delivering it. Because what do? We get the highest ranking title guy that we can, SVP of this, general manager of that, and Jeff calls them happy platitudes, right? If we can get the headshot and the quote, great. If we can put it in a slider on our homepage, oh, those are really good. Videos are good. Videos cost money. Videos take production. Oh, but smart CMOs, we figured that out years ago, because we just go to Dreamforce or any place else our top clients are. We fly the camera guys in. We buy them a nice dinner the night before. We just stack them up, right? Get your videos that way. The problem is it's a false currency, and it's a false currency because having run large lead pipelines and everything else, what do we also tend to do as marketers and salespeople? We tend to take all those happy clicks on all that content and we count it as buying intent, don't we? We lead score the hell out of it. And then we tell sales, hey, look at all these MQLs we got. Marketing's doing our job. Except for when you look at MQL to SQL conversion rates, and it's about 20%, right? In any other industry, people lose their jobs. So if 80% of what I'm pushing to sales is not actually sales ready, we might want to go back and say we've got some assumptions we're making about what a sales ready lead is, and we might even want to peel the onion back further and say, well, all this content that we think signals buyer intent maybe isn't that at all, right? What do we need to do to jump back to the presentation?
Oh, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay, good. Yeah, so one of the things that Jeff and I talked about putting this together, and I'm a big believer in, is the idea of making your customer the lead actor. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'm going to have to go super quick. But on the left, we take a look at brand-generated content, stuff that, me as a CMO and running sales enablement as well, what we historically fell into the trap because, as Jeff talked about, it was the expectation. Sales want case studies? We'll give them case studies. After all, sales is our internal client, right? The problem with this is both sales and marketing need to, as Jeff said, unlearn some habits. We would identify off our buyer personas because we're good researchers, a pain point or some sort of business outcome the client wants, the prospective customer. We develop some solution narratives. We create these scripted customer testimonials, 2.5 minutes. We've got our Wistia and YouTube stats about, over 2 minutes. Nobody watches the video. So we carefully craft that, and then we use these things as what I'm going to call an asset type, and I'm going to show you what I mean, okay? So I've got case studies, ebooks, white papers, spec sheets, kill sheets, on and on and on. And oh, by the way, we have testimonial videos as a distinct asset type in our content library, right? And for those of you in the demand gen role or affiliated with that, then you choose in your lead nurture tracks whether to attach that as an asset or you Marketo or Pardot or HubSpot your way into attaching other assets. And we're going to see why you can't compartmentalize this if you're going to do it right. So the idea is the brand controls a narrative, and the customer role within the narrative, meaning we have this affection for the highest ranking guy or gal we can get on the video. And the problem with that is they're not the ones doing the vetting of your solution. I don't know too many $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year executives on Thursday night that are bored out of their mind and they're clicking on PPC ads and doing LinkedIn search. They usually have people in their organization at a manager level or an analyst level that do that. They start at the beginning of the process, they come in because they own BANT later, but these aren't the people who need to be convinced to put you on the short list. And this is the problem. We're targeting the wrong in many cases, and I'm not saying it's not good to have the SVP talking head on occasion, but we're targeting the wrong audience. The advantage to the CGC, as Jeff and I like to think about this customer-generated content, is you're identifying what he talked about, fears, question, and doubt. And he just demoed that, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. And then you're mapping your VOC influence opportunities. In other words, who do we know and in what circumstance could we serve up questions to tease out customer perspective that can help knock those down earlier in the sales cycle, so that we're influencing our way to getting on the short list, whether it's CEB's 57% or somebody else who believes it's 67, or it doesn't matter. It's more than half, and to Jeff's point, we have to influence somehow. The other thing is that I'm going to talk about isolation versus integration of assets. I said over here in number 4, the problem with isolating VOC is a quote asset type. It's one of the many things in our content arsenal, is we're still thinking about this the wrong way, as though it's optional to integrate customer perspective. We'll alternate that with a white paper. We really need to integrate, not isolate this, because every touch point should have, where possible, an opportunity for that VOC integration. Yes, ma'am.
So if, let's say, some companies maybe are let's say it's not really one decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
It's panel decision makers, right?
Well, it usually is, right? Buying groups.
So how do you then, it's not like you're, instead of picking the highest title out of that, are you shooting content with all of them?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, and I'm realizing I'm up against time, but I will spend some time with you afterwards. What we need to do is recognize whether it's 5.4, 6.5, latest stats are up to 8. Depending on your industry, if you've done your homework on your journeys and persona research, you have a pretty good sense, right? It doesn't matter down to the decimal, pretty good sense of who your stakeholder roles are. The magic is here that you need to identify through that research what role they're playing and at what stage of the buying process. And then what we're going to do is talk about how you would map which perspectives do I need at which stage. So absolutely. So if you're selling software and it's a SaaS application and your environment is somebody might have a on-premise app that they've got engineering hours in that they're maintaining, right? You may have a different set of people in DevOps, et cetera, that have to be sold because it's job security. I'm moving this to the cloud as opposed to on-prem app. Versus a little later in an evaluation stage where you may have other considerations, particularly around data security, et cetera. So yeah, the mapping, and this is what Jeff said, and I'm vehement about this sometimes to the point of confrontation. Brad and I were on a business trip to a large German industrial company last summer, where I asked the marketing director in the room, I said, and she was talking about buyer personas, and I said, first thing, did you involve sales at all? Do you even have kind of a common ICP definition? No. And then the question is, well, how much research have you done behind that? Not a lot, at which point my kind of response is, then they're marketing personas. They're only buyer personas when you talk to buyers. Otherwise, it's smart marketers, hopefully, in a room, but they're still guessing. And the other thing I like to say is guessing is expensive and guessing gets people fired. So what we want to do is get out of the hypotheses and the urban legend mode, and we need to get in talking to real buyers. And I think that's at the core of what Jeff's talking about. So if we take a look at typical marketing and sales tactics along a buyer journey, this should be pretty familiar. Marketing in blue, sales in green, right? And I took Jeff's evaluate and buy and I split them out because there's a little distinction there I wanted to call out. But as marketers, our job is what? Take a prospect to a lead, we score them, we get them to an MQL, we hope a lot of those convert to an SQL, then sales, we're going to equip them as marketers or sales enablement pros with some narratives and some assets and some technology and some other things, and we hope then that we get to closed one and we do our win-loss analysis and we kind of figure out why are we winning deals, we keep doing more of that and fixing the things that why we're losing deals, and then we watch close rates and all of that stuff, right? And then there's some sort of upsell, cross-sell play to get share of wallet and revenue per account, right? Pretty familiar. Now, here's what we do. If you read left to right, and I pulled IDC and Gartner and Forrester because I didn't want to leave anybody out, right? And then I added Serious Decisions and everybody else to OMAP. This is a blending of what they will tell you should deliver left to right, chronologically. And I circled testimonials because what Jeff talked about 40 minutes ago is don't do testimonials and referrals as much as unscripted VOC. So here's what we do as an industry. We do this. And testimonials, which is supposed to be VOC, is a single content asset type. And I'm willing to bet in your content library, it's the type of which you have the fewest assets because they're expensive and they take time, right? And customers sometimes are reluctant. So we carpet bomb in the buyer journey, the buyer with brand content, with our motives woven into the narrative space. We are the lead actor. Now I teach at a university level in an entrepreneur program, sales. It's a top 10 program in the US. And the first thing I do in a 16-week semester is I have a slide up that says, in effective selling, it's about the buyer, not the seller. And the problem is, we all know, we live it, we are obsessed with our narratives, no matter how they really jive with the buyer reality. So this is what we do. Down at the bottom is kind of a summary of what Jeff talked about. Okay, the idea that early on the prospect does online search and reviews, and one of the things they want to find out from peers is how they're defining requirements, how they're approaching strategy, right? They're trying to understand how to approach the problem. What frame should I be thinking about in terms of problem? Or taking advantage of market opportunity. At the research phase, then they're asking peers, either people in their circle that they know by name, they have relationships with, or people in their industry through trade associations and other at-length mechanisms. They're asking, how are companies like mine solving this problem? How are people in my role solving this problem, right? So this is laying our breadcrumb trail about how I need to think as a buyer about solving this for me. And then in the what we call kind of the SQL evaluate stage, they want to look at, okay, so now I got to start vetting to get to my shortlist to start the RFP process, et cetera. Oh, by the way, how are my peers vetting, comparing, and evaluating? So all along here, and then at the buy, what experience did my peers have after the sale? Onboarding, problem for anybody? Too many companies don't pay enough attention to this. I came out of the data center and hosting industry where we had Capgemini and Bang & Olufsen and Harley Davidson, a lot of these big clients. And we'd sign 5-year deals, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in MRC revenue. And we had a clause that if we move them off of Rackspace or Savvis or whomever, within 30 days, if they're not happy, they can get out of that 5-year contract and millions of dollars of revenue on the table. So we've spent all this money on selling and marketing to win the deal, and then we put ill-equipped, ill-trained, incompetent onboarding in place. You frustrate enough of those customers, and you talk about churn at the end of a 5-year annuity contract. How about churn in the first 30 days because the onboarding and the transfer of the business was a train wreck, right? We don't focus enough as an industry on that and helping customers to understand what to expect, right? And then over here, adopt and expand, et cetera. So in the dotted line, the point to this slide is the peers are looking for validation from who they trust, and it's not us. I mean, we've seen the enemy, it's us. I saw statistics recently last week, 32% of B2B buyers trust branded content, 72% of B2B buyers trust peer content, right? So it's a 3-to-1 problem. So this is another reason why video and audio makes sense. We've all seen stats like this. We are wired as human beings, and all buyers at the end of the day are human beings, to process visual information quickly. We can decode emotion. We can not only intellectually but emotionally connect with sincerity and authenticity. You can't do that effectively in a traditional white paper. Okay? So I want to take Dell and EMC. I'm from outside of Austin, so I'm going to take a local example, and it just happened to be convenient. I wanted to look at a big whale type account, not to pick on these guys. Kudos, if you go to the Dell EMC website, you will see under cloud storage a voice of the customer area. Now that's good, so they're trying to do this, but here's what I want to do, going back to this idea of asset type and isolating versus integrating. If I go to this page, I see a CIO from the Vatican Library, right? Very sexy, cool type of customer testimonial. So we've got a very senior level guy, a C-level guy, and this is isolated in the website as though it's a stepchild option that somebody might want to click on. as opposed to integrating this perspective in their industry pages, if they're going to have a use case page, reimagining the use case to follow the outline that Jeff talked about, and certainly product and solution pages, right? And so what we're recommending is you want to expand your perspective, as I talked about earlier, beyond the SVPs and CIOs, but to the managers, the directors, the frontline people that are going to vet vendors to create the shortlist for the SVP to review. They're also the ones that have to live with the solution and use it more than likely day in and day out. Whose perspective on onboarding, ease of use, corporate, what it took from IT to integrate, ROI, who do you think is going to know? Is it the 400K guys or the 100K guys or the 60K guys? It's the front line. But we don't capture their perspective because we're all intoxicated with the highest level exec we can get in the video. What's more, if you take a look at HP, and I stayed with cloud storage, if you look at digital landing pages, things like this, so a landing page you can tie to PPC, social retargeting, and content syndication. What do we have here? We've got a lot of forms or fields to fill out, half a dozen here to get what? Another white paper. I got a great idea. If your call to action was perhaps integrating customer perspective, maybe even setting up some access to the pages Jeff's talking about that go away, is that valuable? So can we feature customer perspective actually integrated into landing pages? Now, is that an anchor text link to a secure page? Is that a frame on page? There's a variety of ways to attack this, and I know I'm up against time. Let's take a look at white papers. So I used one of my own here. If we take a look at documents, white papers, case studies, spec sheets, buyer guides, everything, you can deep link URLs in the content, okay? These are not deep link URLs that we'll call video or audio tracks to say we're really smart guys. These are real life integration of how customers are addressing a problem, answering a question, overcoming fear or doubt, okay? So I want to give you an idea that you can do this and have a hub, think hub and spoke. You can have your assets centralized and call that linked to a variety of spokes, which are different content types that could use those, okay? So you can still have a repository, you can tag it and everything else and still be able to use these. So what we did is we came up with a quick CGC scorecard, and I know I've got about 60 seconds. It's all your fault. You're buying the beer. Yeah, I know. So what we're going to do is I don't have time to run through this, but here's what I want you to do because you have the deck, and Jeff and I uploaded this 3-4 days ago to the community library. We've identified 8 ways that you can use a customer perspective, okay? As thought leaders, somebody mentioned earlier, what about integrating their perspective in thought leadership? Absolutely. Why would you not, right? Is innovators. Let's show you how a customer is using our product or service in an innovative way to drive business outcomes. And a lot of times if you ask them, they'll tell you what they're doing. You don't have to come to them with, hey Jim, can you go on? You can ask the question. So, you know, in the last 6 months or within 12 months of provisioning the product, are there any ways, unexpected ways that you were able to use the product to drive business results that were outside of the scope of what you originally bought it for, right? On down, validators, the ambassadors, customers as journalists, contributed editorial. How many of you, again, back to blogging and everything else, content production is a problem. So we've set up, it looks like this skewed a little bit in the deck. It's my Mac to his Windows probably, but we've got a scorecard here that you can go through and self-score yourself. On the left, are you engaging your customers to capture the asset? And then once you have the assets captured, tagged, and libraried, are you integrating it across these types? Okay, this is an idea, kind of an idea sheet, okay, to be thinking about, are we doing this? And you can score yourself, 0 to 10, largely you're probably unengaged. You're only coming to your best customers when you need something, right? And reference fatigue and video fatigue is not really good CX collection. And I want to close with this point. A lot of people have asked, you know, how do you tee those conversations up? Well, QBRs in CX discovery are 2 great ways to kind of mask that, right? Hey, we would really like to get in your own words how we are performing, or operationally what your experience has been, or are you getting the kind of ROI you thought you would get, right? Within the confines of what's permissible, QBRs and CX discovery are 2 great ways in addition to just asking for it. So with that, Brian, thanks for the extra 2 minutes. That was quick.